Hello and welcome to my Community in Words project for this class. For this assignment, I chose to do Lower Merion Township in Montgomery County, which is a small suburban area just north of Philadelphia. And this is where I grew up. So here is a map of the area. I'm just going to zoom in. You can see the close proximity of the area to Philadelphia. So here's Center City. We have the Museum of Art, and Lower Merion Township is this rectangle here, which encompasses Ballackinwood, Narberth, Wynwood, Ardmore, Bryn Mawr, and Gladwin. Now, as you can see, the majority of Gladwin is green space and high-end residential homes. And I grew up actually right there. So here are some stats I pulled off of the Census Bureau website that I thought were really important about the resident information in Lower Merion Township. The total population is only 63,633, but the median household income is $140,499, which you can see is that's rather high. So what we can gain from these two stats alone is that this is a relatively affluent area. And then we're kind of confirmed that by 78.8% of residents having a bachelor's degree or higher. There's only 2% who don't have health care. I find that to be very telling as well. Considering the high costs of healthcare, this is another indicator that this is an affluent area. The employment rate, 61%. Total housing units is 25,000. And of the 63,000 of the population, only 2,882 are of Hispanic, Latino, or any race other than white. So I find that also very compelling when you think about stats for affluent neighborhoods. So we have some more resident info. The median age is 43 years old, which is relatively high. I think that also says that when you combine that with the median income, that says a lot about what those people do for a living. And, you basically sum this up as like a rich white neighborhood when you look at the lack of diversity in culture. So 9.4 Italian ancestry, which is pretty high. 4.4 live in poverty, which is low. And 78% of people have a bachelor's degree. So that also speaks to the wealth of the neighborhood, that most people without question attend college. So here is a chart I pulled, which I found to be very interesting in terms of when you think of the median income and then you think of the type of work that they're doing to make that money. I find very interesting. So on the lower end, you have local, state, and government workers at 6.9%. So we know the majority of the residents there do not work in the government. Only 8.8% are self-employed. 9.1% are self-employed in their own incorporated business. And then we have 20.7% work in the private, not-for-profit sector. And then you have a whopping 54.5% in private companies. So when I think of that, I think of private law firms, private doctor's offices, private schools. The list goes on, which also speaks volumes about society's Resources. When you live in an affluent community, you're going to have better private sector. When you live in a more impoverished community, you're going to rely more on public resources. When everybody knows that public resources versus private resources are going to differ greatly. So some more residential info. 61% are married, so that also speaks volumes when you think about affordability, being single, unmarried, and trying to find housing when you don't have a spouse. The median gross rent is $1,575, which is very high for just a single individual, which also brings the home ownership rate to 75%. So, and we have the majority of residents are white with 48,429. So this right here is saying a lot. This is saying that the majority are white, married families who own homes and make about $150,000 a year, which I would not say is like the national average. I would say that's above. That's high. And then here's a photo of one of the towns, Narberth, Pennsylvania. This is a photo of downtown. This neighborhood's also very historical. The majority of the politicians are Democratic. As I was looking on a couple websites, most of the senators and members of the House of Representatives were all Democrat. And when you think about the religious affiliations in this neighborhood being largely Jewish, and that tends to go hand in hand with liberal and democratic policy views. So here's Ardmore, PA, another downtown photo. And then here we have the population density per village of Lower Merion. So they include some more towns that weren't in the Google Maps, such as Penn Valley, Belmont Hills, Marion, Penwyn, and Wynwood. So we can see that what's interesting about this chart is the largest populations are in the smallest areas. So here in the tiny blue areas, we have West Ardmore and East Ardmore that cover just a tiny fraction of space, yet contain most of the population in this chart. Whereas over here, as I said earlier, Gladwin is the majority green space, yet only contains 1.4 of the population. So we can see that it looks like affordability and population are being pushed to these areas. And it would also be coincidentally that these are probably where you would find the most cultural diversity in terms of Latino, Hispanic, and Black populations. So overall, Lower Merion Township is a highly affluent white community, leans largely liberal, both in policy and perspective. Although it is a very safe and nice place to grow up, I think it has a lot of classist problems, racist problems, and an imbalance of like social equity. So even though it's a beautiful place, I found this project to be extremely interesting when you're looking at statistics of the residences, people that live there versus people that live in Philadelphia. Because again, this is right outside of Philadelphia. So I think that these statistics were extremely interesting. And thank you so much for watching my PowerPoint.